Hello, everyone, and welcome again to the Elevate Your Equity podcast, where investors with a special emphasis on couples begin, continue, and deepen their journey to financial freedom together using the powerful vehicle of real estate investing to do it. And today we have an amazing guest, super experienced, really well-versed in the real estate realm from all aspects, from being an agent to being a syndicator. And so we're really excited to sit down with Mr. Chris Tao today. Chris, how are you today?
Doing good. Thanks for having me on the show.
Absolutely. Thank you for being on. So Chris, what we like to start off with normally is tell us how you got started in real estate investing and walk us from the first moment that you got interested in it to all the way to where you are right now.
Well, how much time do you have? You on the short version or do you on the detailed, painful journey?
I'm a fan of getting a sample of everything. So let's do the best that you can to summarize all of the good emotional points on here.
All right, cool. So started off, I think my journey is very common to everybody. Started off as an IT manager, did a 20-year career, right? Trying to climb the corporate ladder. And then throughout that time, when I first started in IT, just looking for the highest dollar, right? Jumping from gig to gig, wasn't too worried about being laid off, market condition, market cycle, and so forth. But as I get older, I realize, hey, every time I get laid off, it takes longer to get another job. So eventually, at first I thought it was just, hey, I'm not networking with the right senior director, right? A VP who's taking me wherever they go. So my mindset was basically, I need to get well connected, okay? So keep climbing the corporate ladder, provide value until my waking moment is that get to senior management. And then one of the first things they asked me to do within 6 months getting the job is lay off people. So which at the time I thought was great. You know, I was naive. I'm thinking, hey, I know my team very well in 6 months. It's time for me to quote unquote train the fat, right? Make the entire team more lean, more executable, and high performing. But the marching order was different. They say, Chris, we need you to cut off based upon high cost locations. Just so happened my best performer was in a very expensive country. So because the marching order was reducing country footprint, I had to give up my number one guy being laid off. He did absolutely nothing wrong, just happened to be in the wrong country. After turning in his name, I think 2 weeks later, corporate office looked at it and said, nope, that's not good enough. I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, well, we didn't hit the dollar amount. So now I got to give up another person at a high salary level just to hit the dollar amount. Well, we all know over a course of career, right? The senior you get, the more salary you have. So I got to give up basically my number two guy. So in one swoop, I have number one and number two guy out. Versus where I was trying to get rid of the three bad performer and they will stay in the team. And I couldn't get rid of them because now I'm shorthanded. Last thing I need is reduce 5 people from the team, right? That's my waking moment to say, this is not going to go for long term. So now I start to look back and say, okay, how can I supplement my income? That's when 2014, I started to do real estate because I have a passion for real estate. I'm one of those weird guys that can look at 100 homes and never buy anything. So with that in mind, I say, well, you know what? Other people is able to buy houses. Tell you what, the company I work for is S&P 500 company. So I started to become a realtor, offering my service to say, hey, Mr. Colleague or Mrs. Colleague, if you want to buy a house, come to me and I'll make it easy for you. So that was my way of getting a commission and quote unquote getting the bonus from the company. So that's how I got in. And then finally, I knew it was good to learn a commission from selling real estate. Then I realized, let's multiply, right? Go on a large scale. And most people will do in single family is fix and flip, wholesaling and all that stuff. As a project manager, I've always think ahead. So now I know if I do well, multiply by 100, I will be pulling my hair out. Never had time with family, because I'm always out there hustling, cold calling, or working with GC all over the town and never home for my family. So I say, no, that's not a good way to do that. So after asking a lot of people how to scale, step into multifamily, join a group called Brass Sumrock, And then 2 years later, own a 204 unit, right off from 0 to 204 in a 2 year span.
Congratulations. That's a lot of work. And, there's a lot of things in there, Chris, that are kind of understated. Like you just kind of flew by that saying, oh, yeah, I just started to buy and sell homes and then, decide to do some flips here and there. There is a lot of mindset work that goes behind coming from a W-2 position to turning into sort of an entrepreneur, like a side entrepreneur, right? You got like the side hustle going on. And also it's spoken from my true heart. It sounds like you're a project manager. That's my background as well, at least in the W-2 world. And so can you talk a little bit about how your brain went to real estate? Because I know it's not really a natural thing when people start working in W-2s. Like, how did you get turned on to real estate from the beginning?
That's a good question. I guess it's more of, I'm kind of built for that in a way. But then owning real estate, a lot of people look at it as, well, this is a $100,000 debt. It's a commitment, right? More people are afraid of it than is to embrace it. So I kind of have that real estate mentality already, that bug. Like I mentioned earlier, I can look at 100 homes and not get tired of it. So combine that bug with project management, because as a project manager, you have to think ahead 3 months at a time. If this timeline goes well, if we just dip a little bit uncorrected, 3 months could be a big problem. Plus, I'm very detailed. So when I look at a house, I can see there's a crack in the wall. That means there's a foundation problem. If trees are too close, there's potentially plumbing problem because the roots get underneath, all kinds of stuff. So when I kind of look at houses, I pay attention to those details and I think ahead 3 months down the line, okay, what kind of problem I will face. So that's kind of a mentality that I already have it in my DNA in a way. So when the opportunity comes, it's kind of natural for me to gravitate more of real estate versus, it's kind of like a doctor. I'm not a biology guy by any stretch. You put me in a hospital situation, I'm like, oh my God, I don't know what to do. But other people who's kind of inclined to have a natural drawn to it, you put them in a hospital like, oh my God, this is a playground for me. So I'm that kind of guy for real estate.
That's awesome. Did you, in the beginning, Chris, ever have experiences with analysis paralysis?
Yes.
How did you get over that?
What I tell other people what I share my story with is be willing to say yes when you're not sure. Most people default is if I'm not sure, then I'm going to say no, right? And that's fine, but I see the world took me further to more possibility when I say yes during an uncertain area. So with that as the background, in that analysis paralysis situation, from the education program, they always tell you start something small, right? Something 50 doors or so and everything. And I followed that too. I was looking at everything between 50 doors. And the analysis paralysis comes in is because it's such a smaller property, it's very hard to make the number work, right? When you bump a rent by $50, you don't see it multiply as fast. But when you're on a large 200 units, $50 rent bump, well, now you're looking at significant rental increase. So what would happen is I was about to give up, but then my realtor, who I've been trying to break into San Antonio market, said, hey, Chris, you should look at this 204 units. My whole blinder was on 100 units or less. So I'm like, why do I even want to look at a 204? Twice as much what I'm looking at. I'm already tired by that time. But it's that unknown. I say, you know what, just one more Excel. Why not? So by saying yes, I plug in everything. I say, hey, wait a minute, this 204 do work. And then I'm like, oh, this is too big for me to buy. So who do I know, right? Start talking to different people and say, hey, if my number is correct, and if you like it, how about we make money together? So rest of it snowball into the first deal.
Great story.
Yeah, that's awesome, Chris. So Chris, I'm just curious during your, as you were telling the story, I'm curious what role your wife played in the whole journey and what kind of conversations you both were having behind the scenes.
She is the best silent partner I can wish for. What I mean by that is my wife is a stay-home mom. So I'm the breadwinner and I go out and hunt and bring home food. We're happily married for 13 years. I see 2019. So that was probably 9 years into marriage.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So she knows I've been trying to transition, right? Everything I do, she pretty much knows. So I told her I'm going to hunt for apartments. And I think it's very important with your spouse, if you're doing this with your spouse, you got to understand what makes him or her work. For her, my spouse, my wife, she kind of like to know the overall marching goal, but she doesn't want to get to know the detail. And she's very afraid of large numbers. So in multifamily, we're talking about a lot of zeros. So she typically said, and I knew her like this before I even ventured in. So I never tell her about how much. So being the perfect silent partner, she knows I'm always in Dallas doing the conferences, San Antonio weeks on end to do all this stuff. So, my wife just basically said, there's only one rule. You just come home every night. So I'm like, hey, no matter how late it is, honey, I will get home. And having that kind of as the background, and I shared this story with a lot of people, is that she never knew how much I spent on multifamily. So the education program was roughly $25,000.
So
Okay.
until now,
Until
until
now.
now,
Until this
Inflation kicked in.
podcast gets released.
that's right.
Well, no, she knows now. She knows now.
Okay.
So let's see. Education program was $25,000. I renewed 2 years, so we're about for $30,035. All the weekend travel, roughly $300, including hotel, right? And then all these trips. That is a small chunks until I got on the contract with the San Antonio property. And then there was $30,000 earnest money deposit, all the closing costs. So by the time I actually got at the finish line and closed, and I say, honey, we need to sit down and talk. And even till today, and I share the same story to other people. When I had that, honey, we need to talk conversation, and back in her mind, she's like, oh my God, this guy's gonna leave me for something. Right? She thought it was gonna be a divorce or something, or something worse. But I say, honey, all this time, that I've been doing real estate, right? And I say, first of all, we finally got one. It's clear because I held it from, November of 2018 when we first got it under contract until March of 2019 when we finally closed. That's when I had the conversation with her. So it was a good 5 months. I say, honey, we need to sit down and talk. So I give her the entire numbers that I just run with you. And she's like, where did you have $50,000 hiding that I didn't know about?
Oh, man.
And I say, honey, wait, hold on. That's not it.
Yeah.
Closing costs. And then I actually, spend $50,000 in the property itself, right? We invest in our own deal. She's like, wait a minute. You hit $100,000 from me and never told me about. So I told her, like, luckily we getting all that money back, right? Because without projection, we're going to double the money and everything else. So she's like, well, I thought you were going to divorce me.
Oh, man. Wow. Well, that must have been a pleasant surprise, because did you also tell her what that meant for you guys, being such an active role in such a large syndication right out of the box?
Yes. So I kind of still tipped her in since 2019 about what all this means, right? So when I say, honey, look, if we keep doing this correctly, it's going to replace my W-2, right? So we have to suffer for a bit of all the times that I'm away from home. There's actually a reward, which is the cash flow, the investment is going to double over 5 years and so on and so forth. So that enables me to be kind of famous, quote unquote, a little bit of famous among brokers, so that I'm now a little bit recognized, somebody who can take down a deal and then go forward, open up more opportunities to buy more property.
I love that. So you basically had started to kickstart your reputation just by going right out of the gate into a 200 unit. For those who are just starting out, Chris, is that something that you would recommend? Or how would you recommend someone getting to the place where you are right now? Because, a lot of people are probably looking at what you've accomplished and looking at this and being like, man, I don't know how I'd be able to do something like that. What would you recommend for people like that starting out?
I would say if you want to do multifamily, like I mentioned before, always have a yes mindset, okay? Other gurus mentioned that's a limiting beliefs or what have you. I would like to rephrase it a little bit, just saying yes to an opportunity, even though you're not sure, okay? And that's basically what happened to me. I was looking, my blender was on, I was looking at 100 and less, opportunity came, I didn't know. I just said yes. And then next, the journey started, right? But looking back now, not only have that yes mindset, but you have to understand who you are, because it took me 2 years to get the first deal, right? So that big leap is possible. So don't let anyone discourage you not to go bigger. Multifamily journey is not always 0 to 25, 25 to 50, 100, 200. Everything is possible, but know what you're capable of, because that big leap took a lot of time, right? It's easier to pick up smaller rocks than it is to move a boulder. So know what you can and cannot do, and then be able to find partners that supplements your weakness. I'm a big believer in strength finder. In that book, he talks about you don't need to be well-rounded. You don't need to be a Swiss Army knife, because if you go to a job site with a Swiss Army knife, you're not as effective as a hammer, a knife, a screwdriver, or anything. If you're naturally a hammer, well, that's all you do. If you're faced with a screw, then you go look for a friend who has a screwdriver, and next thing you know, you guys can get things done. Versus you trying to change who you are from a hammer to a screwdriver, that just doesn't work. So that's why I'm a strong believer of Pathfinder. Know who you are, and then partner people who their strength is your weakness, and thereby as a team, you guys can go out and achieve a lot of big things.
Yeah, Chris, I just wanted to thank you for that, because there's a lot to unpack in what you just said. The first thing that I took away was the fact that the path of single family homes is very linear, but the path of
Yes.
multifamily is nothing linear about it at all. As a matter of fact, it's the anti-linear, isn't it? It's scalable in every single way. Results can come at any time, right? They can come in unexpected ways and in really pleasant or maybe unpleasant ways as well. And it just is up to your mindset to be able to figure out like which way is going to be best for you. And sometimes you don't even know that, and it just happens. It just falls in front of your feet. And so that's one thing I took away from this. And the second thing that I took away is that multifamily is a team sport. And when you use a tool like StrengthsFinder, you're able to figure out what it is that you have as your special sauce, right? That you can leverage with other people and achieve amazing things, absolutely amazing things. And so what I wanted to do now is I wanted to unpack that just a little bit more. I wanted to go a little bit further and get more personal with you on this. You've obviously taken StrengthsFinder and you've done all of that work, right? What is your special sauce, Chris, that you would say has helped gotten you to where you are today based on what you've achieved so far and who you are right now?
My special sauce. I want to say a little bit of a personality, in that way that I'm very approachable, right? Sometimes people have that, it takes a little bit of time for them to warm up. For me, I can make friends pretty easily, and people thought I know them for months and months, but I only met them for like 3 minutes. So it's a person, outgoing personality in a way, and then be able to see the big picture and able to dive into the detail as well. Because a lot of times I don't just follow the numbers. I kind of mentally imagine the process from going from point A to point B to point C to point D, right? A lot of times in multifamily, people just say, hey, if you get 100% occupancy, it solves all your problem. I don't do that. And I kind of say, well, first of all, you need people that pay rent. Just because you give away the whole house and now you have 100% occupancy, it doesn't really solve the problem. And if you just put in the wrong tenant, who now that we see in COVID, they don't pay rent and they don't leave, right? So I kind of look at to say, okay, we want high level, we want 100% occupancy, but what kind of advertisement we need to provide, what condition of the property needs to be at in order to attract, if it's not your ideal tenant, but maybe one step down, but definitely avoid this other side that we don't want. So it's having that walk through. If I was a tenant, I wanted to pay $1,000 per month for rent. What would I look for? What would I be willing to accept? And have that detail level so that you know how to go from point A to point B to C to D. So that's, I think it's the personality and be able to foresee and walk through it in detail. It's my secret sauce.
I love that, Chris. And I think I can relate with that well, because those are some things that I pride myself on. Maybe the approachability factor, I'm not sure yet. I don't know if I'm approachable or not, but
You're very approachable. Come on now.
thanks, Chris. But I am very forward thinking. Like, Sophie and I, we sit down and we do our budgets every month, or we used to, at least. Now we're at a point where we don't have to do that anymore. But back when we were really trying to accomplish goals and really get ourselves lined up, we would sit down and we would plan every dollar ahead of time, pretty much a la Dave Ramsey, right? Like doing that type of thing. But what I wanted to impress upon the listeners here is just listen to what Chris said. He just told us that he went from being corporate to being, doing some single families here and there, doing flips, to having the forward thinking to go into multifamily. And his key skills is approachability and forward thinking. How many of you listeners out there have those two skills too? I just want you to think about that, because having those two skills can carry you all the way through to owning a 200-unit apartment complex with the right mentors, with the right time, and with the right effort. That's all that's setting you apart. So I just wanted listeners to hear that, because that was really great, Chris, and I appreciate you bringing that up, because it really is about personality, what your drive is, what you want, and what your vision is. And then those two special sauce are just characteristics that grow with you. And some people have, Chris, the opposite skills, and they still do well because they're people to work with. So
same. I really appreciate you talking about teams, because this is not a solitary sport, right? It's you have to enlist all of your superheroes around you. And so, Chris, I'm curious too, like what, throughout this whole journey, what was like a tough moment that you faced, and how did you get through it for our listeners out there?
Well, tough moment is probably owning the property. Buying the property is easy. Owning it is the hardest part.
Yeah. Tell us about the stabilization that you had to go through on your 208. And for those who are listening, stabilization just means you take over the property. Oftentimes the previous property manager ends up putting warm bodies in the property, which are basically people that don't pay rent and that barely make their screening criteria, if at all. And they do that just to puff up the numbers so that when a buyer like Chris comes along, they say, oh, the property is great. So anyway, stabilization is a process of vetting all that out, rebranding, getting the property to a place where you want it to operate, and it meets the projections and numbers that you're telling your investors. So Chris, can you tell us a little bit about that, and maybe the fun times you had getting your property stabilized?
So what most people don't teach you is the headache that you'll get once you own the property. It's so much easier to tell people, hey, here's an Excel, right? You put in this number, outcomes 8% cash on cash, double your money over 5 years. But when you own a property, what a lot of people don't tell you is you're working with different kind of personalities. People who buy multifamily, we are typically higher in pay grade or higher in education, right? Because at the end of the day, how many people have $50,000 saved up to put into a property, or even 100,000? And I know some colleagues of mine even invest 21 deals passively, right? So 21 times 50,000 each, that's not your average McDonald's worker, right? However, when you own the property, the first thing you do is you hire a property manager. They're charging you 3%. So that's roughly $60,000 a year, okay, give or take. And they hire a bunch of property managers, which their salary is anywhere from 30,000 to maybe 50,000, many of which are not college degree people, right? If they have personal issues or whatever, they might not come to work today, right? And so there's a lot of turnover at the people level who maintain your multi-million-dollar property. We as syndicators are responsible for our investor, but we're not the one that goes out and insert a call and say, hey, Mr. John, can you come over for a lease? And I'm going to check Mr. John's background and so forth. We're counting on someone else to do that for you, and hopefully your interests are aligned. So that's the hard part about owning the property, is that you have to say, okay, Mr. Property Manager, you're charging me 3%. This manager is not working out. Please replace him or her, right? And hopefully you'll replace with the right one the next time. And if he doesn't, you just keep replacing. And fix whatever problem it is. And what I noticed that sometimes even at the property management company level, there's that butting of heads, right? Are you really the owner or am I only really the owner, right? Who works for who?
Yeah.
So that's the part that they don't teach you. And then it's very hard. I kind of can embrace that because I used to be a people manager, right? And I love real estate, as I mentioned before. In my own home, I'd lay my own floors, I move cabinetries and, punch holes through the wall for a new exhaust fan. I'm Mr. YouTube when it comes to home improvement. So I kind of know like it doesn't take $7,000 to lay floors in a 1,000 square feet apartment or whatever it is. And then if you keep pushing, and that's one thing that frustrates me is we always say get 3 bids on every work. But if the property management company is lazy and they let other people know, hey, here's a bid for 7,000, come a little bit cheaper. So I'm always get frustrated. The 3 bids is always 7,000, 7,500, or 6,500. It's like, it's very clear somebody gave out the secret number. And so there's no true number unless you spend all your time calling the vendor and say how much it is. So that's the part most people don't teach you. And it's very frustrating because you kind of like, am I being cheated on or this is a real number?
That's great advice. Is there any other difficulties that you had when you were stabilizing the property? Like maybe when you first picked up the property, right? Was there anything you had to do that was kind of like a firestorm that you had to deal with? Because yeah, this asset management piece is great, but I know that there's definitely some other stuff going on, like when you first pick up a building that doesn't go according to plan.
Reputation is a big thing. I mean, there's so many things. My 204 units, it's not a walk in the park. It's worse than a roller coaster in my mind, because there's so many things that casually catch you by surprise. So reputation, for example, right? The previous seller stuffed it. That's the term we use when you just put a warm body into the property just so you can boost occupancy, but you don't care whether they pay or not pay. Once you took it over, you now inherit that problem, the problem tenant. Well, you got to think about why does the seller does that in the first place, right? He's getting ready for sale. He potentially could be owing people money, which is we found out later on. A lot of vendors don't like our property because the previous seller don't pay. So now our vendor list is very selective. Now you can imagine the good guys who say, well, it didn't work out the first time. How am I going to trust you the second time? So naturally the price will be higher. So you not only have to overcome your reputation, now you're paying a higher price, right? At the same time, you're trying to get rid of the people that will stuff, who's not paying rent, sacrificing your revenue and still doing that. So there's a lot of juggling going on at that point. And then, of course, if your property manager also subscribe to the fact that a stabilized product is 90% occupancy, they too can take the easy route and just let, any John Doe come in and say, oh, Chris, we're great. Now we're 90% occupied. We got rid of the bad people, kind of dip through that takeover because we got rid of the bad people, but they don't tell you, oh, by the way, we also put in the bad people at 90% occupied. And then you start looking at collection, never picked up. So what's going on? So you just constantly poking at it and say, the numbers don't make sense. What's wrong? What's wrong? What's wrong?
You have to diagnose the issue. That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Chris, so having all of your experience, going through everything you've been through, if you had to do it all over again, what do you wish you knew starting out?
Great question. I would probably do the same thing over again, but faster, right?
Faster meaning in the way of like looking at your fears and limiting beliefs and trying to cut through them, or just willing through it, or how would you do that?
Yeah, what does faster mean?
So there's a major gap between what people teaches you and what you experience, right? So for example, people always teach you, hey, go from smaller to larger and so on and so forth. And, look at certain markets, right? Always look for agency debt, this and that. But now I own it. Whatever they taught me was probably 30% the reality that I see, right? So talk about debt. We bought the property back in 2019. Interest rate was going higher. People are saying stay with long-term debt. don't do anything that's a bridge or floating rate. Well, guess what? Who's laughing now? I'm crying because my interest rate is very high and I'm stuck. So what happened is when you trying to market is great, but if we were to sell, there's a huge penalty because I'm a long-term agency debt.
Yep.
But my friends who are on floating rate, I mean, interest rate is now 2.5, less than 3%, depending on where you're at, right? Very cheap debt, but we can't switch. They are able to sell and pivot, accumulate a lot of wealth for their investors. So that's one part of reality gap that I'm seeing. Another thing is, vendor management, right? They always talk about how you buy and here's the ecosystem that we can trust each other for and blah, blah, blah. But those are not necessarily local vendors. And you really need to pick your friends correctly. So in other words, if your friends just say, hey, we always use John, go use John. Make sure you double check John's qualification, his reputation. He might not be the right person for your particular job. So I would go through the same motion, do it faster, because now through it all, I now have a little bit better trust on certain vendors versus just say, hey, all my friends use X, so I'm going to use X. Because what would happen is everybody makes the same Y mistake. Does that answer the question?
It does. It does. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Good stuff. And lots of great takeaways for budding investors here. It's really good. So let's go ahead and move into the rapid round towards the end of our show. And in this part, we're going to ask you 5 questions that we ask all of our guests. Okay. We're going to ask them you really, really quickly, and hopefully we can get some short responses so we can get through them pretty quick. All right.
All right.
Do you want to ask or?
Yeah, I'll go ahead.
Go for it.
All right, Chris. So first question is, what book has had the biggest impact on you and why? It doesn't have to be business, but something other than Rich Dad, Poor Dad, because we get that response a lot.
Wow, you took the best book out of there.
Yeah, that's right. Everyone always goes for that.
Yeah.
But there's reason, right? Because it makes sense.
Yeah.
But if that's your book, that's okay.
There's another one. Oh, here we go. Tax Loophole for the Rich.
Oh, that is great. Great book. Awesome.
So Rich Dad Poor Dad teaches you how to think about money. But the Tax Loophole for the Rich really helped me understand why the IRS book is written a certain way. The IRS, credit to Tom Will, right? He's the one that kind of made this thing famous. But the IRS textbook is really a roadmap for what the government wants you to do, right? If you follow it, you can be even richer beyond your dreams to the point where you never have to pay taxes. So understanding, they kind of call it the loophole just to catch your eyes, but it's really the roadmap to riches, right?
Love it.
Through the proper tax return. If you're a W-2 earner, you'll never be rich. Right? All the famous people, and I think I read an article that talks about 8 out of 10 millionaires from real estate. Okay. And our famous ex-president once said he didn't pay any property, but he didn't pay any income taxes because he's smart.
Because he's smart. That's right. I remember
and
that.
Generationally, he's a real estate tycoon.
Yeah.
Right. And if you look at other people, their wealth strategy is through real estate.
Excellent.
So, having that purple book gives you the right mindset, saying that you're heading the wrong direction. The tax loophole for the riches kind of give you the roadmap on where you need to keep going for the next 20 years and what you need to do to leave generational wealth for your kids.
That's so great.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah, I don't think any of our guests have mentioned that yet, so that's wonderful.
That's
Thank you. Next question is, if people wanted to emulate your success, what's the first actionable thing that they could do?
Get educated. Yeah, and there's no right or wrong education in multifamily. You got to pick what your tastes are, right? And I tell a lot of people, think of multifamily education like picking a university. You can be just as successful going to MIT, Yale, and Harvard, whatever, and equally successful for going to UT Austin and UH, right? Michael Dell came out of came out of UT. Matter of fact, he actually didn't even finish, right? So there's so many great example of people kind of went on that journey and realized, hey, I got what I needed. I don't need to finish the finish line. And there's some people who just have to have that formal education. I'm one of those guys. I need that formal education and say, okay, at least I know one way to do it. And another thing is, if you want to emulate a success, be willing to pay for the education. What really slowed me down at the very beginning is going to all kinds of online resource, trying to get free education. What ended up happening is a bunch of free opinions. Okay? So there are multiple ways to get to the end. Last thing you want is look at 100 different ways and say, well, which one do I go? You can be in 100 places all at the same time. So my mind is saying, hey, I just need one way. Let me walk it, taste success, and then, okay, now I got the experience. How do I improve? Mm-hmm. So now I can go to a different education group or different masterminds or whatever and subscribe to a new way to achieve success.
That's great. I love that. Free opinions.
Love it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's free opinion. There's a lot of websites. We're not going to name any website.
Yeah, I love that. And then, Chris, what small thing do most people not know about you?
I have 4 kids.
Ooh.
Oh, wow. That is pretty good.
Yeah.
Very impressive. And I don't see any bags under your eyes from lack of sleep. So you guys are doing a great job managing that. That's great.
Well, that's where my wife comes in, right? She's the stay-home mom. I just do my 8 to 5, go out and hunt and bring food home.
Yeah, you
so
think
you have... hey, kids, be quiet. And you can even tell there's no background noise.
There is.
I know. So
That's
impressed.
Really good. I was going to say, people are probably thinking that your job is hard, but man, your wife's job is, that's tough.
All my success goes to her, and it's not a fluff. This is true because just as much I don't tell her about all the dollars I spent, she equally doesn't tell me all the problems she's running into at home.
It just
4 kids running around in different directions. We have a pre-teenager, and you know how that goes.
Yeah, of course. All right, Chris, number 4, how do you like to unwind and restore your creative juices by yourself?
I like to watch movies.
Good answer. And a favorite movie you have?
Avengers.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
You watch.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Chris, we have a lot in common.
For me nowadays, it's anything that I don't have to think about, it's the way I want. So
me too.
It's a great escape. Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah. Your brain kind of shut down. You just watch all these fireworks. And like, oh, that looks cool.
That's cool. I love it. All right, Chris, number 5, last question is, what is your guys' favorite family vacation spot?
Out of country. So anywhere outside the United States. I think, we like to go visit China because we have family over there.
Yep.
But my wife will tell you she loved to be out of country plus no internet.
That sounds lovely.
Very smart, man.
Because she said every time that my phone works, she's like, that's not a vacation because you're on the phone.
Yes, I agree with her. I can't wait to meet her.
Yeah, we have a lot to talk about, Chris. It's really great. Well, Chris, thank you so much for coming on the show. I don't know about you, but we had an absolute blast having you here.
So much fun.
As we wrap up here, let the audience know how they can get a hold of you. And maybe if you have an opportunity coming up that's 506C, maybe you can mention it. Let us know, like what's in your world? How can people learn more about you?
Oh, yes. Thank you for bringing that up. So I am fundraising a 506C deal. Mm-hmm. It's a 2016 104 unit out in Louisville, Kentucky. So right now it's a unique time for multifamily because the interest rate is very low. And a lot of times people are buying more and more stuff, right? So please take a look at my website, www.christowrealestate.com/Moss MOSS-Creek, CREEK, to find out more about the opportunity. Because with this current low interest rate, we can hold a property longer. And having a 2019 almost brand new everything, you can hold this thing for 30 years and still be a better product than the 1980 that you hold 30 years. Because then you'll be spending a lot of investors' money, repair things like roof, plumbing, electrical, that you cannot raise rent on. Everything we do for that property is for the benefit of tenant and increasing NOI.
Excellent.
And to find out more about me, visit my website, christowrealestate.com.
Absolutely. Hopefully by the time people listen to this, I hope that you guys will be fully funded, but I'm glad that you gave them the extra website as well, so that way we can have people take a look at what's new in your world. And Chris, thank you so much for being on the show. It was an honor to have you here, and really appreciate all of your wisdom, your advice. I'm sure everyone took away quite a lot from it. And for you listeners who have listened all the way to the end of the show, so happy that you've been here this whole time, taking away all these pearls of wisdom from Chris and from the show itself. So what we really love is for you guys to rate or like and subscribe wherever you're listening or watching this, because that really helps us with the algorithm gods, helps us push us up the rankings so that we can get more exposure to more people, and spread the word about Elevate Equity and all of our fantastic guests like Chris that are coming on the show. So that being said, that's all I have for you guys today. So this is Derek.
And this is Sophie.
And we are signing off. Thanks, guys. Have a wonderful day.